Lieutenant Frank Novak stood in the Ardennes snow watching his 6th Sherman burn. The tank crew boys he'd trained with, laughed with, were gone. Not because the Germans were better soldiers, not because American steel was weak. They died because someone in Washington decided all tanks should be olive green. In a world of white green meant death. That night, Novak made a decision that would either end his career or change warfare forever. He was going to steal enemy paint. January 8th, 1945, Ardennes Forest, Belgium, 06:30 hours. Novak didn't flinch when the ammunition cooked off. 3rd Sherman this week. He counted the cracks 7, 8, 9. Each pop meant another shell exploding inside another piece of evidence burning away. "Sir?" Morrison appeared face black with soot. "Walker and Chen." "I know." "Johnson's hands." "I know." Novak turned. 26 years old, engineering degree from Ohio State, and he knew exactly what 3rd-degree burns meant. "That's 10 men, Tom. 10 men in 6 days. Morrison didn't answer. What could he say? Novak pulled out his notebook, oil-stained pages damp from snow. He'd been documenting every engagement since they crossed into Belgium. Times, distances, casualties. An engineer's attempt to find the pattern in people dying. "Look at this." He flipped pages. January 3rd, 07:45, German Panther fires from 800 yards. We don't see it until it moves. 2 tanks hit. January 5th, 1340, same thing. They sit still, white paint makes them invisible. We roll across open ground in olive drab, visible from half a mile. He snapped the notebook shut. 78% of engagements, whoever fires first wins. Not better armor, not better tactics, just who sees who first. Morrison kicked snow. Supplies say anything about paint. Novak laughed, no humor in it. Form 2115 submitted 6 days ago. Captain Anderson said he'd look into it. Major Collins said winter camouflage isn't in the tactical doctrine. Corps Supply said. He pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. Read, winter camouflage paint must be processed through proper channels with justification of tactical necessity to be reviewed at next quarterly supply allocation meeting. When's that, March? Morrison stared. March. We'll be dead by March. Novak stuffed the paper back. Or the snow melts and we won't need it anyway. So we just keep... Morrison gestured at the burning Sherman. No. Something in Novak's voice made Morrison look up. No, we don't. January 10th, 1945. Company Command Post, 1900 hours. Captain Walsh didn't look up from his maps. You're asking me to approve theft. I'm asking you to let me save my men. Novak jabbed a finger at the map. This warehouse 2 miles back. German supply depot until last week. Intelligence says it's secured but not cataloged. If there's paint there, if doesn't cut it, Frank. Then how about this? Novak pulled 3 photographs from his jacket, laid them on the map. Burned tanks. Body bags. Walker was going to open a garage in Detroit. Chen wanted to teach high school. They died because they were visible and the enemy wasn't. Walsh picked up 1 photo, stared at it. Since we entered Belgium, Novak continued, Baker Company has lost 9 tanks, 17 men, 73% in daylight enemy in concealed positions. The Germans aren't winning because they're better. They're winning because their paint matches the snow. You know what you're describing is German supplies, captured enemy materials. Novak leaned forward. The regulations were written by people in warm offices who never watched a 20-year-old burn alive because proper channels took too long. Walsh set down the photo, walked to the small window. Snow was falling again, thick, heavy. How much paint? Novak's heart jumped. 40 gallons, maybe 50. And you're certain it's there? Intelligence mentioned water-based coatings in the summary. That's whitewash. Has to be. Has to be. Walsh shook his head. You're gambling on assumptions. I'm gambling that German vehicles are all white, which means they had supplies somewhere and this was a major depot. Novak straightened. Sir, even if I'm wrong, even if we find nothing, it costs us 1 night and some fuel. But if I'm right, we could cut casualties by half. Silence. just wind and distant artillery. If you get caught, Walsh said slowly, court-martial. Yes, sir. If you take men off the line and Germans attack while you're gone, I'll testify against you myself. I understand. And if this doesn't work, if you waste time on a stupid idea instead of preparing for Sankt Vith, I will personally bust you to private. Novak met his eyes. If it doesn't work, I'll request it myself. Walsh turned from the window. His face was stone, but something flickered underneath, maybe respect, maybe exhaustion. I have no knowledge of any unauthorized activities. I will be in this command post for the next 6 hours unavailable. Whatever Baker Company does during that time is beyond my oversight. Pause. Clear. Crystal, sir. Good. Dismissed. Novak was at the door when Walsh spoke again. Frank, the captain was looking at the photographs. Bring them home. That's the plan, sir. January 10th, 1945. Baker Company. Motor pool, 2100 hours. 15 men crowded the maintenance tent. Novak didn't waste time. I'm going to ask you to steal German paint. It's against regulations. If we get caught, there will be consequences. Anyone who wants out, leave now. Nobody moved. Where's the paint? Martinez asked. Novak unrolled the map. Supply depot 2 miles northwest. Evacuated 6 days ago, MPs guarding it, but light security. We go in fast, grab what we can get out. What's our story if we're stopped, Morrison? We're on patrol checking for German stragglers. Being thorough. Novak looked around. But understand, if this goes south, I take the fall. I'll testify you were following orders, had no knowledge of my intentions. That's bullshit, Martinez flat. We're in this together. Murmurs of agreement. Listen to me, Novak's voice hardened. I'm an officer. I can claim field judgment, misunderstood regulations. You're enlisted. A court-martial could destroy your futures. Henderson, 19 youngest commander in the company, raised his hand like he was still in school. Sir, you know what'll really destroy our futures. Getting killed because we're too chicken shit to break some rules. Laughter dark-tired but real. Morrison straightened. Sir, with respect, we've been watching good men die while we wait for supply officers to initial forms. If you're offering a way to fix that, when do we leave? Novak felt something tight in his chest loosen. 2,300 hours. 2 trucks, 8 men. Quick in, quick out back before dawn. He paused. Last chance. Nobody moved. Morrison, Henderson, Martinez, you're with me. Rest of you get some sleep. If this works tomorrow, we're painting tanks all night. As they filed out, Morrison lingered. You really think this'll work? The camouflage. Yes, I've seen what it does for the Germans. That's not what I'm asking. Novak pulled on his gloves. I think we have to try. Because if we don't, if we just keep following rules and waiting, we lose half this company before February. I can document that. I can prove it with numbers, but I can't live with it. Morrison nodded. Then we're stealing paint. Yeah, we are. January 10th, 1945. 22:45 hours. Staging area. The 2 trucks idled in darkness. 8 men, faces blackened, weapons loaded. Novak checked his watch. 15 minutes. Henderson climbed into the truck bed, sat heavily. Sir, can I ask you something? Make it quick. Why, you're the company commander. You could send us, stay here, maintain deniability if it goes wrong. Novak looked at him. 19 years old. Still had that high school earnestness. Because I'm the one asking you to risk a court-martial. That means I go first. He climbed into the passenger seat. And because if we get caught, I need to be the one talking to the MPs. You're too honest. You'd probably apologize and confess everything. Laughter from the truck bed. Morrison started the engine. You know the route. Northwest Road 2 miles left at the burned-out church. Novak pulled out the map, checked it one more time, even though he'd memorized every turn. Depot should be on the right, big warehouse with the roof half collapsed. And if there's more than light security, then we get very polite, very confused, and very lost. Novak folded the map. We're just a patrol that took a wrong turn. And if they don't buy it, then I do a lot of talking while you drive away very fast. The second truck pulled up behind them. Martinez at the wheel, 3 more men in back. Ready, Novak called. Martinez gave a thumbs up. All right. Novak checked his watch. 2,300 hours exactly. Let's go steal some paint. January 10th, 1945, 23:47 hours. German supply depot. The warehouse looked dead. Half the roof had collapsed, probably artillery. Snow had drifted through the holes piled in corners. One dim light over the entrance. No movement. Morrison killed the engine 50 yards out. They waited. 1 minute. 2. I don't see any guards, Henderson whispered. They're here somewhere. Novak scanned the perimeter. MPs wouldn't leave a supply depot completely unguarded. Martinez's truck pulled up beside them. Novak gave hand signals, spread out. Stay quiet, watch for guards. They moved through snow, weapons ready. The warehouse door hung crooked on its hinges. Novak pushed it open, rusty squeal that made everyone freeze. Nothing. No shouts, no movement. Inside the warehouse was chaos. Crates, smashed open, supplies, scattered. The Germans had left in a hurry. Novak clicked on his flashlight, swept it across the space. Look for anything marked Farbe or Weiss, he whispered. Paint or white. Check every crate. They spread out. Novak moved down the left side, checking labels. Ammunition number, medical supplies, number, rations, number. Sir, Martinez from the back corner. Found something. Novak hurried over. Martinez stood beside a pallet stacked with metal containers, 5-gallon cans, German markings. Weisse Anstrichfarbe. Martinez read slowly. That paint. Novak popped one open. Inside, thick white liquid, chalky smell. He touched it, rubbed fingers together. Water-based. Quick drying. That's it, he counted quickly. 80 cans. That's... He did math in his head. 400 gallons. More than enough. How many do we take? Morrison. All of it. Sir, we can't... Every gallon we leave is a gallon some other unit needs. Novak grabbed a can. Start loading, fast. They formed a chain, passing cans hand to hand to the trucks. Heavy work, each can weighed 40 pounds. Novak's shoulders burned after the first 10. They'd loaded 30 cans when headlights cut through the warehouse. Everyone froze. An engine noise, heavy vehicle getting closer. Keep loading, Novak hissed. Fast. They doubled their pace. 40 cans. 50. The engine stopped. Door slam. Footsteps crunching snow. 60 cans. 70. A voice, American. This depot is restricted. Who's in there? Novak set down the can he was holding. Straightened his uniform. Walked toward the entrance. Outside, a Jeep, MP markings. 2 soldiers, both armed. The one who'd spoken was a staff sergeant, maybe 30, face hard with suspicion. Sir, this depot is off limits pending inventory. I'm going to need to see your authorization. Novak pulled out his orders, standard patrol assignment. Nothing about supply depots. Handed them over. The MP scanned them with a flashlight. These don't authorize you to be here. We received reports of possible German stragglers in the area. Novak kept his voice level. Bored, just another routine patrol. We were doing a perimeter sweep, saw the warehouse, decided to check for enemy presence. By loading supplies into your trucks. Damn. The MP had already looked. Novak changed tactics. Dropped the bored tone, met the sergeant's eyes directly. You want the truth. That would be refreshing. My company has lost 17 men in 6 days. 73% because German tanks are white and ours are green. We're visible from half a mile, they're invisible at 200 yards. He gestured at the warehouse. That paint in there, it's the same whitewash the Germans use for winter camouflage. I'm taking it because if I don't, I'll lose 10 more men before Sankt Vith. The MP's face didn't change. So you're stealing supplies. I'm taking captured enemy materials that will save American lives. Without authorization. Authorization takes weeks. My men don't have weeks. Novak pulled out his notebook, flipped to a page, shoved it at the MP. January 3rd, 2 tanks, 4 men. January 5th, 1 tank, 2 men. January 8th, 1 tank, 3 men. You want me to wait for proper channels while I document how my entire company burns? The sergeant looked at the notebook. At Novak. At the trucks being loaded behind them. What's your name, Lieutenant? Frank Novak Baker Company, 3rd Armored. You understand I could arrest you right now? Yes, Sergeant. You understand this could end your career? Yes, Sergeant. The MP pulled out his own notebook. I'm going to need a statement. For the record. Novak's heart sank. This was it. Caught documented court-martial. He pulled out a pencil, tore a page from his notebook, wrote quickly, I, Lieutenant Frank Novak, removed 80 cans of white paint from German supply depot for immediate tactical use. This action was unauthorized. I take full responsibility. He signed it, dated it, handed it over, did it. The MP read it, folded it, put it in his pocket. Then he looked at Novak. How many men do you have? 15 tanks, 45 crew. And this paint will help them. It could cut my casualty rate by half or more. The sergeant was quiet for a long moment. Behind him, his partner, younger, maybe 22, shifted nervously. Thompson, the sergeant said without turning. Did you see anyone at this depot tonight? I what? It's a simple question. Did you see anyone? The younger MP looked confused. Then understanding dawned. No, Sergeant. I didn't see anyone. The sergeant turned back to Novak. We're going to drive around this depot one more time, check the perimeter. That's going to take about 20 minutes. When we come back, I expect this warehouse to be empty, and that statement, he tapped his pocket, will have been lost in the snow. Clear. Novak couldn't speak for a second. Then, clear, Sergeant. Good. And Lieutenant? The MP leaned closer. Next time you need to borrow supplies, pick a depot farther from MP headquarters. Makes my life easier. He climbed back in the Jeep. The engine started. They drove away. Novak stood in the snow watching the taillights disappear. Sir Sergeant Martinez from the warehouse. What just happened? We got lucky. Novak turned. Finish loading. Fast. We've got 15 minutes before they come back. They worked like machines. 70 cans. 75. 80. Morrison slammed the last tailgate shut. That's everything. Move out. The trucks rumbled to life. They rolled through the gates onto the dark road into the forest. Nobody spoke for the first mile. Then Henderson from the back. Sir, did that MP just let us commit theft? He didn't see anything. Novak didn't turn around. And neither did we. But, Henderson. Novak's voice was firm. He made a choice. The same choice we made. Sometimes you have to break small rules to follow bigger ones. Like, don't let your men die for stupid reasons. Exactly like that. They drove through the night. Behind them, the depot faded into snow and darkness. Ahead, Baker Company waited 15 olive green tanks that would soon become ghosts. January 11th, 1945. Baker Company Motor Pool. 0200 hours. They unloaded in silence, stacking cans beside the tanks. 80 cans, 400 gallons, enough to paint every Sherman twice over. Morrison opened one, stirred it with a stick. The paint was thick, chalky, exactly like the whitewash on German tanks they'd captured. How long to paint one tank? Henderson asked. 3 hours, maybe 4. We'll need to do multiple coats for good coverage. Novak did mental math. All 15 tanks. We'll be working until dawn. Maybe longer. Then we'd better start now. They gathered brushes, rags, anything that could apply paint. Some men used their bare hands. The paint was cold, but not toxic. Novak climbed onto the first Sherman, started painting the turret. Long strokes covering the olive drab with white. The transformation was immediate. Green disappeared, replaced by snow. By 0400, 6 tanks were finished. They sat like ice sculptures barely visible in the darkness. By 612 tanks. At 0730, Captain Walsh appeared. He looked at the white tanks, at the exhausted men covered in paint, at Novak standing beside the last Sherman with a brush in his hand. Lieutenant, Walsh said quietly, a word. They walked away from the others. I assume your patrol last night was productive. Very productive, sir. Walsh nodded, looked at the tanks again. And if anyone asks where you got the paint, captured enemy supplies, sir. Found at an abandoned depot during routine patrol. Good. Walsh paused. Colonel Pierce wants to see you at 1000 hours. Novak's stomach dropped. The colonel knows. The colonel knows 15 of our tanks are now white, instead of regulation olive drab. Walsh's face was unreadable. What he doesn't know is how they got that way. Yet. Sir, finish painting Frank, clean up your men, be at headquarters at 1,000 hours, and... Walsh almost smiled. Have a good story ready. He walked away. Morrison appeared at Novak's elbow. The colonel. What are you going to tell him? Novak looked at the white tanks barely visible against the snow, finally matching the winter that had been killing them. The truth, that we're done dying because of the wrong color. He picked up his brush. Come on, one more tank to go. The sun rose over the Ardennes, weak winter light turning snow golden. 15 Sherman tanks sat in neat rows, white as ghosts, invisible as prayers. Inside the motor pool, 20 men covered in paint collapsed onto cots, too exhausted to celebrate. But outside in the snow, their tanks had finally disappeared. And for the first time in weeks, Frank Novak thought they might actually survive Sankt Vith. Colonel Pierce didn't look up when Novak entered. The office was cold. Everything in Belgium was cold now, but the colonel's face was colder. Sit down, Lieutenant. Novak sat. Behind Pierce, through the frosted window, he could see Baker Company's motor pool. 15 white tanks stark against the snow. Evidence. Pierce finally looked up. I received an interesting report this morning. 15 M4 Shermans painted in unauthorized camouflage using paint of unknown origin. He leaned back. Care to explain? Captured German supplies, sir. Water-based whitewash found during routine patrol of an abandoned depot. Routine patrol. Pierce's voice was flat. That required 2 trucks and 8 men at 2,300 hours. The area was flagged for possible enemy presence, sir. We were being thorough. Thorough. The colonel stood, walked to the window, looked at the white tanks. And it just happened that while being thorough, you discovered exactly what you needed. Yes, sir. Pierce was silent for a long time. Novak waited, hands steady on his knees. He'd prepared for this, practiced the answers, anticipated the questions. But he hadn't prepared for the colonel to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. Do you know what you've done, Novak? Pierce turned. You've created a problem. A very specific problem. Sir. Division called this morning. Wanted to know why one company has winter camouflage when the rest of the division doesn't. I told them I didn't know. They said find out. So I'm finding out. He returned to his desk. And now I have to write a report explaining that one of my lieutenants took unauthorized initiative, and somehow it worked. Which means every other company commander is going to ask why their tanks aren't white too. Novak kept his face neutral. I can provide the location of the depot, sir. Other units could. The depot is empty. MPs checked it this morning. Cleaned out. Pierce's eyes were sharp. 80 cans of paint. 400 gallons. All gone. I see. Do you? The colonel sat. Because here's what I see. I see a lieutenant who broke protocol, commandeered supplies without authorization, and put me in a position where I have to either court-martial him or admit that breaking protocol saved lives. He picked up a paper. Captain Walsh submitted preliminary casualty projections for Sankt Vith. Based on current rates, he estimates 20 to 25% losses in the first engagement. He set the paper down. That's 1 in 4 men, Novak. My men. Yes, sir. And you think white paint will change that? I think visibility is the primary factor in tank combat, sir. German doctrine emphasizes first shot advantage. Their winter camouflage gives them 3 to 5 seconds more target acquisition time. In combat, that's decisive. Pierce studied him. You have data on this? Yes, sir. Novak pulled out his notebook, the same oil-stained pages he'd shown Morrison Walsh, the MP sergeant. I've documented every engagement since we entered Belgium. Time, distance, weather conditions, who fired first, casualty rates. The pattern is clear. Winter conditions favor concealment. Camouflage reduces visibility by approximately 70% at ranges over 400 yards. The colonel took the notebook, flipped through pages. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. This is good work. Thank you, sir. This is also completely outside your assigned duties. Pierce closed the notebook, handed it back. You're a tank commander, not an intelligence analyst. Someone needed to figure it out, sir. And you decided that someone was you. The colonel leaned forward. Let me tell you something about the Army, Lieutenant. The Army doesn't like people who decide things on their own. The Army likes people who follow orders, respect chain of command, and trust the system. Yes, sir. But, Pierce's voice softened slightly. The Army also likes people who win. And more than that, the Army likes people who bring their men home alive. He stood. Sankt Vith offensive begins in 48 hours. Your company will be in the vanguard. If your white tanks perform as you predict, if they demonstrate tactical advantage, I'll submit your findings to division. If they don't, he didn't finish. Understood, sir. Good. Dismissed. Novak was at the door when Pierce spoke again. Lieutenant, for what it's worth. The colonel looked out at the white tanks. I hope you're right. So do I, sir. The door closed behind him. Novak stood in the hallway, letting his breath out slowly. Not a court-martial, not yet. But the next 48 hours would determine everything. He walked back to the motor pool. The men were cleaning equipment, checking ammunition loads, doing the 1,000 small tasks that kept tanks running. They looked up when he approached. Well, Morrison asked, are we getting court-martialed or medals? Neither. We're getting a chance to prove it works. Novak climbed onto the nearest white tank, ran his hand over the painted armor. The surface was rough, chalky, you could still see brushstrokes. But from 50 yards away, the tank nearly disappeared against the snow. Sankt Vith. Day after tomorrow. We're leading the assault. Henderson whistled low. Pressure's on. Yeah. Novak jumped down. Which means we need to be ready. Check every system. Test every gun. I want these tanks running perfect. Because if we fail, it's not just us, it's every other crew that could have used this paint but didn't get the chance. Martinez was adjusting a track tension. Sir, you really think this'll work? I've seen it work for the Germans. No reason it won't work for us. But what if... Then we die trying something instead of dying doing nothing. Novak's voice hardened. We've lost 17 men waiting for the system to catch up. I'm done waiting. We're done waiting. He looked around at his crews, exhausted, paint-stained, scared. Good men who'd followed him into theft because they trusted him, because they wanted to live. 48 hours, he said quietly. Get some rest. Eat. Write letters if you need to. But be ready. Because when we roll into Sankt Vith, the whole division is going to be watching. And we're going to show them that breaking the rules was worth it. The men dispersed. Morrison lingered as always. You okay? The sergeant asked. Ask me in 48 hours. That's not an answer. Novak sat on the tank tread. I keep thinking, what if I'm wrong? What if the paint doesn't help and we lose people anyway? Then I stole supplies, risked court-martial, put everyone's career on the line for nothing. Or, Morrison said, you gave us a chance. That's more than we had before. Is it? Novak pulled out his notebook, flipped to the most recent page. January 11th. 15 tanks painted. 0 casualties. For now. Every decision has a cost, Tom. I just hope we can afford this one. Morrison sat beside him. You know what Walker said the night before he died? Novak looked up. He said, someday someone's going to figure out we're doing this wrong. He didn't know it would be you. He didn't know it would be too late for him. Morrison paused. But maybe it's not too late for everyone else. They sat in silence, watching snow fall on white tanks that looked like ghosts, like prayers, like something between hope and desperation. January 11th, 1945. 2 days until Sankt Vith. 2 days to prove that stealing paint wasn't just theft, it was survival. The temperature dropped. Night came early as it always did in winter. Inside the motor pool, men huddled around portable stoves, checking gear one more time, writing letters they hoped wouldn't become last words. And outside, 15 white tanks waited in the snow, invisible and ready. Henderson was the first to notice. He was doing a final inspection of his Sherman when he stopped, stared at the tank beside his. Then he laughed, surprised, delighted. "Sir, come look at this." Novak hurried over. "What?" Henderson pointed. From 20 feet away, the white tank was barely visible. But from 5 feet, you could see what Henderson had found. Someone had painted a name on the turret in white letters that were only visible up close. "Ghost Rider," Henderson read. "Who did this?" Martinez raised his hand. "Figured if we're going to be invisible, might as well embrace it." He grinned. "Besides, the Germans named their tanks. Why shouldn't we?" "I like it." Novak looked at his own tank, still nameless. "Anyone got paint left?" Within an hour, all 15 tanks had names. Ghost Rider, Snow Wolf, White Lightning, Frostbite, Winter's Wrath. Names painted in white on white, invisible from distance, visible only to the crews who would fight in them. Morrison's tank became Polar Bear. Henderson chose Avalanche. Martinez went with Blizzard. Novak stood before his own tank brush in hand, thinking. Finally, he painted 2 words, Invisible Justice. "Justice for who?" Morrison asked. "Walker, Chen, Johnson. Everyone we lost because someone decided paint wasn't important." Novak stepped back, looking at the barely visible letters. They deserved better than dying because of regulations. And if Sankt Vith goes wrong, then at least we tried to fix it. He set down the brush. That has to count for something. The next day passed in slow tension. Final briefings, equipment checks, more equipment checks. Nervous energy with nowhere to go except maintenance and preparation. Captain Walsh called company formation at 1600 hours. Everyone gathered: tank crews, support personnel, mechanics. 60 men standing in snow breath, misting in cold air. Walsh didn't waste time. Sankt Vith offensive begins tomorrow at 0600. Baker Company will advance on the northern approach. Objective is to secure the ridgeline and provide covering fire for infantry assault. He paused. Division is aware that we're using non-standard camouflage. They're interested to see results. Murmurs through the formation. Which means, Walsh continued, everyone will be watching. Not just to see if it works, but to see if breaking protocol to make it happen was justified. His eyes found Novak. No pressure. Uncomfortable laughter. "Get some sleep," Walsh said. "Check your gear one more time. Write your letters. Say your prayers. And tomorrow..." He looked at the white tanks. "Tomorrow we show them what invisible tanks can do." Formation dismissed. Men scattered to final preparations. Novak found himself walking to the perimeter where the forest began. He needed quiet. Needed to think without 60 men watching, waiting for him to be confident when he wasn't sure of anything anymore. He found a fallen log, brushed off snow, sat. Pulled out his notebook, flipped through pages. All those statistics, all those careful observations, did they matter? Or was he just an engineer who thought he could solve combat with math? Mind company. He looked up. Walsh stood there holding 2 canteen cups, steam rising from both. "Coffee, sir." "Something like that." Walsh handed him a cup, sat on the log. Couldn't sleep either. Too much thinking. They drank in silence. The coffee was terrible army-issue grounds floating in it, but it was hot. "You know," Walsh said, "I've been commanding men for 8 years. Before the war, I thought I understood leadership. Follow orders, trust the system, take care of your soldiers. Simple." He stared into his cup. "But war teaches you the rules aren't always right. Sometimes taking care of your soldiers means breaking the rules." "Is that permission, sir, or philosophy?" "It's acknowledgement." Walsh looked at him. "What you did stealing that paint wasn't about ego or glory. It was about keeping people alive. That matters more than protocol. Division might disagree. Division isn't watching their men burn." Walsh's voice was quiet, hard. "I am. And if what you did prevents that, if it saves even one crew, then I'll defend it to my last breath." Novak didn't know what to say. "Tomorrow's going to be hard," Walsh continued. Sankt Vith is well defended. The Germans know we're coming. They've had 2 weeks to dig in position armor, prepare defenses. We're going to take casualties regardless of camouflage. I know. But maybe we take fewer casualties. Maybe your paint makes the difference between losing 15 men and losing 5. Maybe that's worth everything. Walsh stood. Get some sleep, Frank. Tomorrow you prove whether stealing paint was genius or madness. He walked away, leaving Novak alone with terrible coffee and the weight of 45 lives depending on whether he was right. Night fell. Final letters were written sealed left with unit clerks. Equipment was checked one last time. Men tried to sleep and mostly failed. Novak lay in his cot staring at the ceiling. In 12 hours they would know. Either the white paint worked, either visibility really was the deciding factor, or he'd just led his company into battle based on a theory that would get them killed. He thought about Walker, who wanted to open a garage. Chen, who wanted to teach. Johnson, whose hands were burned so badly he'd never hold a gun again. All the ones who died waiting for proper channels. Tomorrow, no one would die waiting. Tomorrow, they would fight invisible or die trying. At 05:30 hours, January 13th, 1945, 15 white Sherman tanks rumbled to life. Engines coughed, caught settled into steady growls. Crews climbed into position. Loaders checked ammunition. Gunners calibrated sights. Drivers tested controls. Novak climbed into invisible justice, settled into the commander's position. Through the periscope, he could see the other tanks, white shapes, in white snow, barely distinguishable from the landscape. Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. All tanks radio check. One by one, the crews reported in. Ghost Rider ready. Snow Wolf ready. White Lightning ready. 15 tanks, 45 men, all trusting that stealing paint had been the right decision. Baker Company, Walsh's voice came through. You are cleared to advance. Show them what invisible tanks can do. Novak keyed his mic. All tanks follow my lead. Stay in formation. Watch your spacing. And remember, they can't hit what they can't see. The tanks moved forward, white ghosts sliding through white snow toward Sankt Vith. Toward proof or failure. Toward vindication or court-martial. Toward the moment when Frank Novak would learn whether breaking the rules had saved his men or killed them. The ridge appeared at 06:47 hours, a snow-covered slope rising 300 yards ahead. Intelligence said German armor was dug in somewhere beyond it, exactly where nobody knew. Novak's hands were steady on the periscope controls, but his heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The moment that would prove everything or destroy it. All tanks halt. His voice came out calmer than he felt. Gunners, scan the ridge. Report any movement. 15 white tanks stopped engines idling. Through the periscope, Novak studied the terrain. Snow-covered ground, scattered trees, the ridgeline sharp against gray sky, perfect ambush country. Ghost Rider, nothing visible. Snow Wolf, negative contact. White Lightning, all clear. One by one, the crews reported. No enemy in sight. But they were there. Novak knew it. The Germans wouldn't abandon Sankt Vith without a fight. Sir. His gunner Corporal Davies pointed. Movement. 11 o'clock ridge crest. Novak swung the periscope. They're barely visible against snow, a dark shape. Tank turret German markings. Panzer IV hull down position, only the gun visible. Contact. Panzer IV ridgeline 800 yards. Novak's mind raced through calculations. At this range, the German crew should see them easily. 15 olive drab tanks would be obvious targets. But 15 white tanks. They're not firing, Davies said. Why aren't they firing? Because they don't see us. Novak felt something surge in his chest, not quite triumph. Not yet, but possibility. Hold position. Let's see how close we can get. The seconds stretched. 700 yards, 650. The German turret traversed left, then right, searching, looking for targets that should be obvious but weren't. 600 yards. Sir, they're rotating the turret again. They look confused. 550 yards. Range is good, Davies said. I have a firing solution. Hold. Novak watched the German tank. Its guns swept across their position right over invisible Justice and kept moving. They were invisible. The paint worked. It actually worked. 500 yards. All tanks. Novak spoke carefully into the radio. Enemy armor on ridge approximately 500 yards. They haven't spotted us. On my command, we fire simultaneously. Target the visible panzer, then suppress any additional contacts. Fire on 3. He took a breath. This was the moment. Proof or failure compressed into 3 seconds. 1. The German turret stopped moving. Had they been spotted? 2. The Panzer's gun started to traverse toward them, slow, uncertain. 3. Fire. Invisible Justice bucked as Davies triggered the 75mm. Around them, 14 other guns fired in perfect unison. The sound was enormous, a physical force that rattled teeth and made ears ring even through the tank's armor. The German Panzer disappeared in a wall of explosions. 15 shells hitting simultaneously, more firepower than any German crew could anticipate. When the smoke cleared, the turret was gone, blown completely off the chassis. Target destroyed, Davies shouted. Reload. Novak scanned for more contacts. All tanks advanced to ridge. Watch for contact, Morrison's voice cut through. 2 more Panzers left flank. Novak spun the periscope. 2 German tanks emerging from concealed positions, white paint on their hulls. They'd been waiting for the Americans to reveal themselves, planning a crossfire. But they were looking for olive-drab targets. The white Shermans were still nearly invisible. Snow Wolf Avalanche, engage left targets. Rest of company continue advance. The 2 tanks swung their guns. More firing. 1 German tank took a direct hit, began burning. The other retreated behind the ridge. They're running, Henderson said over the radio. They're actually running. Don't celebrate yet. Novak keyed his mic. Stay alert. Could be falling back to... An explosion rocked the ground beside Invisible Justice. Novak's head slammed against the periscope, vision blurring. Taking fire. His driver. Private Collins yanked the controls. The tank swerved. Where's it coming from? Another explosion, this one behind them. It's artillery, Davies said. Indirect fire. They can't see us, so they're bracketing our position. Smart. The German forward observers had seen the muzzle flashes, calculated approximate positions, called in artillery. Can't hit what you can't see unless you saturate the entire area. All tanks disperse, random intervals, keep moving. Novak fought to keep his voice level. Don't stop, don't cluster. Make them waste ammunition. The white tanks scattered. Artillery shells fell in a pattern, walking across the snow where they'd been 30 seconds ago. 1 shell landed close to Blizzard, but Martinez was already moving the explosion, throwing snow but missing armor. Advance through the barrage, Novak ordered. They're firing on our last position. If we keep moving forward, we get under their minimum range. It was basic tactics, but in the chaos of combat, basics kept you alive. The tanks pushed through falling shells, closing on the ridge. 200 yards, 150. The artillery stopped. They were too close now. German gunners couldn't risk hitting their own forces. Crest the ridge on my mark, Novak said. When we go over, we'll be exposed. Hit anything that moves. The ridge loomed. Beyond it, unknown. Could be empty ground or a dozen Panzers waiting. All tanks. Now. 15 white Shermans surged over the ridge. Beyond was Sankt Vith Valley in chaos. German tanks were repositioning, some pulling back, others trying to form a defensive line. Infantry scrambling for cover. Half-tracks loaded with supplies attempting to retreat. The entire German defense was in motion, reacting to an assault they hadn't seen coming. Multiple contacts, Davies was nearly shouting. I count 8, no 10, 12 enemy vehicles. All tanks free fire. Novak's heart was racing now, adrenaline burning through caution. Hit everything military. Avoid civilian structures. Go! What followed was 4 minutes of organized chaos. The white Shermans had position surprise in numbers. They fired, reloaded, fired again. German tanks tried to return fire, but they were caught in the open repositioning when they should have been dug in. Ghost Rider destroyed a Panther at 600 yards. Winter's Wrath took out 2 half-tracks. Polar Bear caught a Panzer IV trying to escape, hit it in the rear armor, watched it burn. Novak's crew was Mechanical Davies, calling targets Collins, positioning the tank, the loader feeding shells with precise rhythm. Fire, reload, fire. Each shot a decision, each decision a life saved or taken. A German Panzer finally spotted them, turret swinging toward invisible justice. Gunner traverse right. Novak's hands gripped the periscope. Panzer 400 yards moving. Davies adjusted, fired. The shell hit low, ricocheted off the Panzer's front armor. Reload fast. The German gun was aiming directly at them now. Loaded. Fire. Davies triggered the gun a fraction of a second before the German did. Both shells crossed in midair. The German round hit the ground 3 feet from invisible justice, close enough to rock the tank. The American shell hit the Panzer's turret ring, the weak point where armor was thinnest. The German tank stopped moving. Smoke poured from the hatches. "Target destroyed," Davies said, voice shaking. Novak realized his hands were trembling. That had been close seconds from becoming another burned Sherman, another letter home. "All tanks, status report." The responses came in, each one lifting weight from Novak's chest. Ghost Rider operational. Snowwolf operational. White Lightning operational. Down the list, every tank reporting green status. Frostbite took a hit, Martinez reported, but it bounced off the turret. Scared the hell out of us, but no damage, no casualties. 15 tanks engaged a superior defensive position, and they'd taken no casualties. Baker Company. Captain Walsh's voice came through controlled excitement, bleeding through. "Infantry reports enemy forces withdrawing from Sankt Vith. The ridge is yours. Hold position and prepare for Phase 2. Novak slumped in his seat, suddenly exhausted. They'd done it. The white paint worked not just in theory, not just in careful calculations in actual combat. "Sir," Davies was looking at him, "we're alive." "Yeah." Novak felt something like laughter trying to escape. "Yeah, we are." Through the periscope, he could see the other white tanks, Ghost Rider and Avalanche, flanking the ridge, Blizzard and Polar Bear covering the valley approach, barely visible against the snow. Ghosts that killed. Morrison's voice crackled. "Did we just win?" "We won this part," Novak said. "Don't get cocky. There's a lot of war left." But for now, for this moment, 45 men were alive who might have been dead. 15 tanks were intact that might have been burning. And somewhere in the command structure, someone was going to have to admit that breaking the rules had saved lives. The battle for Sankt Vith continued through the afternoon. American infantry pushed into the town, facing stubborn German resistance. But the ridge was secure. Baker Company's white tanks holding the high ground, providing covering fire, shutting down every German counterattack before it could form. At 14:30 hours, a runner arrived from division headquarters. Lieutenant Novak was to report immediately to Colonel Pierce. "This is either really good or really bad," Morrison said, as Novak climbed out of his tank. "Probably both." Novak brushed snow off his uniform. Pointless. He was covered in gun smoke and oil and headed for the command post. Pierce was standing over a tactical map when Novak entered. The colonel looked up, face unreadable. "Lieutenant, your after-action report." Novak delivered it quickly, precisely. "Engagement at 0647 hours. Enemy armor destroyed with 0 friendly casualties. Ridge secured by 0730 hours. Sustained defensive position through afternoon." Pierce listened without interrupting. When Novak finished, the colonel walked to the window. "0 casualties," Pierce said. "In an assault against fortified armor positions. That's unusual." "The camouflage worked, sir. German crews couldn't acquire targets efficiently. We had first shot advantage in every engagement." "I saw the gun camera footage from the spotter aircraft." Pierce turned. "Your tanks were nearly invisible until you fired. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like it." "Sir, Division wants a full technical report. How much paint was used, application method, durability, and combat conditions. Effectiveness metrics." Pierce pulled out a folder, handed it over. "You're temporarily reassigned to division planning. They want winter camouflage protocols established for all armored units in theater. Novak stared at the folder. Sir, my company. We'll be fine without you for 48 hours. Captain Walsh can handle operations. Pierce's expression softened slightly. You were right, Lieutenant. The paint matters. Visibility matters. And now Division wants to know how to replicate what you did. What about the unauthorized acquisition of supplies? What unauthorized acquisition? Pierce's face was stone. According to the official record, Baker Company discovered captured German paint during a routine patrol and applied standard field adaptation protocols. No regulations were violated. No court-martial is warranted. Novak felt something tight in his chest release. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Thank your men for not dying. Pierce gestured to the door. You leave for division headquarters at 0600 tomorrow. Bring your notebook, all those statistics you've been documenting. They'll want to see everything. Yes, sir. Novak was leaving when Pierce spoke again. One more thing. There's talk of a commendation. Silver Star, maybe bronze, for tactical innovation under combat conditions. Sir, I don't need... It's not about what you need. It's about what the Army needs. Pierce looked at him directly. Did him. The Army needs heroes who think. Heroes who break rules for the right reasons. Heroes who prove the system can adapt. He paused. Even if the heroes started by stealing paint. Novak returned to Baker Company as the sun was setting. The men were cleaning weapons, checking equipment, doing all the small tasks that came after combat. They looked up when he approached, waiting. Well, Henderson asked. Are we in trouble? No. Novak felt himself smile, the first genuine smile in weeks. We're in the technical manuals. Division wants to standardize winter camouflage across all units. They want me to help write the protocols. Cheers erupted. Martinez threw his cleaning rag in the air. Morrison grabbed Novak in a bear hug. We did it, the sergeant said. We actually did it. You did it, Novak corrected. You trusted me when I asked you to break the rules. You followed me into theft and court-martial territory because you believed it would save lives. This belongs to all of you. Henderson walked over to Avalanche, ran his hand across the white-painted armor. My dad always said the Army was too big to change, too stubborn. He looked back at Novak. I can't wait to write him that we changed it anyway. That night, Baker Company gathered around field stoves, eating hot rations and telling stories about the battle. The details grew with each retelling, how close the German shells had come, how perfect the firing solution was, how the panzers had looked confused right before they died. Novak sat apart, updating his notebook. January 13th, 1945. 15 tanks engaged 12 enemy vehicles, destroyed 0 friendly casualties. Success. But he didn't write just statistics. He wrote names. Davies, Collins, Morrison, Henderson, Martinez, all the ones who'd lived because they dared to be invisible. Walsh found him there, brought coffee that was only slightly terrible. You know what the infantry is saying? The captain asked. They're calling you the Ghost Commander, the officer who made his tanks disappear. The paint made them disappear, I just stole it. You did more than that. Walsh sat. You saw a problem no one else saw. You found a solution no one else found. And you had the guts to break the rules when the rules were killing people. He raised his cup. To successful theft. Novak clinked his cup against Walsh's. To successful theft. They drank in comfortable silence, watching white tanks fade into darkness, almost impossible to see even from 30 feet away. What happens next? Walsh asked. Division wants camouflage protocols written. After that, Novak shrugged. War continues. We keep fighting. But maybe now other units won't lose as many people. Maybe Walker and Chen and Johnson, maybe they didn't die for nothing. They didn't. Walsh stood. Their deaths proved the old way didn't work. Your solution proved the new way does. That's not nothing. He walked away, leaving Novak alone with his notebook and the weight of being right. The temperature dropped. Stars appeared cold and distant. Somewhere in the darkness, German forces were regrouping, planning counterattacks, preparing for tomorrow's battles. The war wasn't over. Sankt Vith was just one ridge, one day. But it was also proof. Proof that paint mattered. Proof that visibility decided battles. Proof that sometimes breaking small rules saved big lives. Novak closed his notebook, stood, walked to invisible justice, placed his hand on the cold white armor. This tank, this theft, had changed everything. Not just for Baker Company, but for every unit that would adopt winter camouflage based on today's success. 1 lieutenant who stole paint. 15 tanks that disappeared. 0 casualties that should have been many. And tomorrow, when Novak went to division headquarters to write protocols and share data, he would make sure they understood. This wasn't about breaking rules for fun. This was about recognizing when rules were wrong and having the courage to fix them. Even if fixing them meant becoming a thief first and a hero second. He climbed into his tank, settled into the commander's seat. Outside, the rest of Baker Company was bedding down secure in the knowledge that their white armor had saved them today and would save them tomorrow. Inside, invisible justice. Frank Novak allowed himself one moment of pride. He'd been right. The math was correct. The statistics held. 40 gallons of stolen paint had purchased 45 lives. That was a trade worth making. That was a theft worth confessing. And if someday they court-martialed him anyway, he'd stand before that board and tell them exactly what he'd done and why. Because men like Walker deserved better than dying in the wrong color. The night deepened. Snow began falling again, soft, silent covering tracks and shell craters making the white tanks even more invisible. By morning, you wouldn't be able to tell which patches of snow were snow and which were armor. Ghost tanks in a ghost war. But these ghosts had teeth, and they'd proven today that sometimes the most dangerous thing on a battlefield wasn't the biggest gun or the thickest armor. It was being impossible to see until it was too late. Novak pulled his jacket tighter, closed his eyes, and let exhaustion claim him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new chances to prove that innovation mattered more than protocol. But tonight, for the first time since entering Belgium, he slept without dreaming of burning tanks. Tonight the color was finally right. Division headquarters was warm. Novak had forgotten what warm felt like. He stood in the briefing room at Euro 6:30 hours, still smelling of gun smoke and tank exhaust, while officers in clean uniforms studied him like he was an interesting specimen. Major General Ernest Harmon sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled, eyes sharp. "Lieutenant Novak, I've read Captain Walsh's report. I've seen the gun camera footage, and I've reviewed your casualty statistics." He leaned forward. 0 losses against fortified positions. Explain. Novak set his notebook on the table. "First shot advantage, sir. In 78% of tank engagements, whoever fires first wins. Winter camouflage extended our target acquisition time by 3 to 5 seconds. In combat, that's decisive." "You're saying paint matters more than armor or firepower." "I'm saying visibility determines who shoots first. And who shoots first usually lives." Novak opened the notebook, showed pages of data. Since December, German winter camouflage has given them consistent tactical advantage. White on white is nearly invisible at 400 yards. Olive drab on white is visible at 800 yards or more. A colonel, Novak didn't catch his name, spoke up. "But this is temporary, isn't it? Spring comes, snow melts, white paint becomes a liability." "Yes, sir. That's why the Germans use water-based whitewash. It washes off easily. Seasonal adaptation." Novak pulled out a paint sample he'd brought. "This is what we used. German Weisse Anstrichfarbe. Applied directly over existing paint, dries in 3 hours, can be removed with water and soap when weather changes." Harmon picked up the sample, examined it. "And you acquired this how?" "Captured enemy supplies, sir. Found during patrol of an abandoned depot." The general's eyes were knowing. "I see. Captured supplies." He set down the sample. "How much paint would we need to camouflage an entire armored division?" Novak had done the math on the drive over. "Approximately 2,000 gallons for a standard division. 15 gallons per tank, 20 tanks per company, multiple companies per battalion." "That's a lot of paint." "Yes, sir. but the alternative is losing 20 to 25% casualties in winter engagements. At current rates, that's 300 men per division over a 3-month winter campaign. Novak met the general's eyes. 2,000 gallons of paint versus 300 lives. The math is clear. Silence around the table. Officers exchanged glances. Harmon walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling again. It never seemed to stop in Belgium. The problem, Lieutenant, is that your solution requires admitting we've been doing it wrong. The Army doesn't like admitting mistakes. With respect, sir, the Army likes winning more than it likes being right. The general turned, and something that might have been a smile crossed his face. Bold statement from a lieutenant. Backed by 0 casualties, sir. Harmon laughed, genuine surprise. Fair point. He returned to the table. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to spend the next 2 days writing a complete technical manual. Paint types, application methods, durability testing, tactical doctrine changes, everything. Then we're going to test it with 3 more companies. If they show the same results you did, and I suspect they will, we implement winter camouflage as standard protocol across all armored units in European theater. Yes, sir. You'll also be promoted to captain effective immediately. Someone at your rank has more credibility when they're telling colonels they've been doing things wrong. Novak blinked. Sir, I don't need... It's not about what you need. It's about what the innovation needs. Harmon picked up Novak's notebook, flipped through pages. You documented everything. Times, distances, casualties, weather conditions. You approached combat like an engineer solving a problem. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. He closed the notebook, handed it back. The war is changing, Captain Novak. We can either adapt or keep losing men to doctrine written before anyone understood winter warfare. You chose adaptation. Now help us make everyone else choose it too. The next 48 hours were a blur. Novak wrote, rewrote, refined. Technical specifications for paint composition, application protocols for different weather conditions, maintenance schedules, tactical doctrine adjustments for camouflaged operations. He worked through meals, through exhaustion, through the strange sensation of being warm and clean while his company was still in the field. On the second day, a lieutenant from intelligence brought him photographs. German tanks captured near Bastogne, all painted white. American tanks from 3 other divisions that had independently started using white camouflage chalk, whitewash, even house paint stolen from Belgian civilians. It's happening everywhere, the intelligence officer said. Your company wasn't the only one that figured it out, but you were the first to document it properly and prove it worked. Novak studied the photos. Crews from different divisions all reaching the same conclusion. Green kills you, white saves you. The solution was obvious once you saw it. The question was, why it had taken so long for command to see it. He thought about Walker Chen Johnson, all the men who died before someone dared to break the rules. How many lives could have been saved if innovation hadn't required theft first? On January 16th, Novak returned to Baker Company. They were bivouacked 3 miles behind St. Vith, maintaining defensive positions. When his jeep pulled up, the men gathered around. So, Morrison asked, are we heroes or criminals? Neither. We're a case study. Novak climbed out, showed them the manual he'd written, 40 pages, technical diagrams, official Army seals. Technical Manual 9850A, Winter Camouflage Protocols for Armored Vehicles, effective immediately across all units. Henderson took the manual, flipped through it. Holy shit, we're in the manual. More than that. Novak pulled out another document. Division is requisitioning 5,000 gallons of white paint for immediate distribution. Every armored unit in theater will have winter camouflage within 2 weeks. The men stared. We changed the Army, Martinez said slowly. We actually changed the Army. You changed the Army, Novak corrected. You trusted me when I said paint mattered. You followed me into unauthorized supply acquisition. He caught Morrison's grin. You risked everything because you believed survival was more important than regulations. This belongs to all of you. Walsh appeared, walking over from the command tent. Captain Novak, congratulations on the promotion. You knew. Got the orders this morning, well deserved. Walsh gestured toward the tanks, still white, still barely visible against the snow. Division wants a demonstration. 3 companies are adopting winter camouflage next week. They want to see how Baker Company applies it, trains with it, maintains it. We're going to teach other units. You started a revolution, Frank. Now you have to spread it. Walsh handed him new orders. You're reassigned as tactical advisor for winter camouflage implementation. You'll rotate between companies, train commanders, supervise application document results. Novak read the orders, felt something like disappointment. I'm leaving Baker Company. Temporarily. Your men will be fine, I'm still commanding them. But what you know needs to reach every unit, not just ours. Walsh's voice softened. Walker died because no one had figured this out yet. Don't let other walkers die because we kept the solution to ourselves. He was right. Novak knew he was right, but it still felt like abandonment, leaving the men who'd trusted him, who'd stolen paint with him, who'd proven together that innovation mattered. Morrison seemed to read his thoughts. Sir, if you can save other crews the way you saved us, you have to go. We'll be here when you get back. And if you're not, then we'll be alive somewhere else because of what you taught us. The sergeant extended his hand. Go teach them. Make sure everyone knows that being invisible is better than being brave. Novak shook his hand, then Henderson's, Martinez's, each man in turn. These were his crew, his company, the men who'd followed him into theft and innovation. Leaving them felt wrong, but spreading what they'd learned together felt necessary. That afternoon, Novak drove to the 4th Armored Division, where 3 companies were preparing to adopt winter camouflage. The commanders were skeptical. Tanks had been olive drab since 1942. Why change now? Novak showed them his notebook, the statistics, the casualty rates, the battle footage from Sankt Vith. He explained target acquisition times, first shot advantage, the math of visibility. Some commanders remained doubtful. Others started asking questions about paint supply and application methods. By evening, all 3 companies had committed to winter camouflage. By the next morning, men were painting tanks white, transforming olive drab into snow ghosts. Novak moved from unit to unit, 4th Armored, 6th Armored, 9th Armored. Each time he told the same story. Baker Company lost 17 men because no one questioned the color. When they questioned it, 0 casualties. The difference was paint and courage. Some crews painted names on their white tanks like Baker Company had. Snow Leopard, Winter Shadow, Arctic Thunder. Others just painted them white and went back to combat practical and efficient. But all of them lived longer. The casualty statistics started changing. Units with winter camouflage reported 20 to 30% fewer losses in winter engagements. First shot advantage shifted from German to American. The invisible became the victorious. On January 24th, Novak received new orders. Report to SHAEF headquarters in Paris. Eisenhower wanted a briefing on winter camouflage effectiveness. Paris was surreal warm buildings, real food officers in pressed uniforms who'd never seen combat. Novak stood in Supreme headquarters still wearing field clothes because he hadn't brought anything else and briefed generals about paint. Eisenhower listened without interrupting. When Novak finished, the Supreme Commander asked one question. How many lives has this saved? Novak had prepared the numbers. Conservatively, sir, between 200 and 300 American lives since implementation, potentially more. It's hard to count casualties that don't happen. 200 to 300, Eisenhower repeated. Because one lieutenant stole paint and proved it worked. And because division was willing to standardize it despite being non-regulation, sir. Innovation often starts non-regulation. Eisenhower stood. Captain Novak, you're being awarded the Bronze Star for tactical innovation resulting in significant reduction of combat casualties. The citation will mention your creative acquisition of necessary materials. Novak felt heat rise in his face. Sir, I don't need... The award isn't for you. It's for every other officer who sees a problem and wonders if they're allowed to solve it. Eisenhower walked around the desk. War rewards conformity and obedience, but war also demands adaptation. You adapted. You solved a problem that was killing men. That deserves recognition, and it deserves other officers knowing that creative solutions won't always result in court-martial. The medal ceremony was brief, formal. Novak stood at attention while someone pinned bronze to his chest and read words about valor and innovation. He thought about Walker, about Chen, about all the ones who died before anyone dared to break rules. This medal wasn't for him. It was for them proof that their deaths had meant something had changed. Something had forced the army to admit that sometimes regulations needed breaking. After Paris, Novak returned to Belgium. Baker Company was still holding Sankt Vith, still painted white, still alive. Morrison greeted him with a mock salute. "Captain and medal recipient, look at you getting fancy." "It's just bronze." "It's proof we were right." Morrison gestured toward the tanks. "And look, we've got company." Around Baker Company's position, 3 other companies had moved in all with white tanks, all adopting the camouflage protocols Novak had written. The motor pool was full of ghost tanks, barely visible against the snow. "Started with 15, Henderson said. Now look, 60 tanks, all invisible. All because you stole paint." Novak walked among the white tanks, seeing Baker Company's innovation replicated across an entire battalion. Ghost Rider and Snow Wolf, alongside new names, new crews, all learning that surviving meant matching the color of winter. Walsh found him at sunset, standing beside Invisible Justice. The tank was worn now, paint chipped from combat armor, scarred, but still white, still fighting. "Division wants you back at headquarters," Walsh said. "They're creating a dedicated tactical innovation unit. Officers who identify problems and develop solutions outside normal doctrine. You'd be commanding it." "That sounds like trouble." "That sounds like progress," Walsh smiled. "The Army is learning. Slowly, painfully, but learning. That rules are guidelines, not scripture. That men who break rules to save lives are assets, not criminals." "What about Baker Company?" "Still my command, still doing fine." Walsh paused. "But we did fine because you taught us to question stupid rules. Now teach everyone else." Novak looked at the white tanks, his invention, his theft, his solution spreading across divisions. Walker's death had sparked this. Chen's death had given it urgency. Johnson's burned hands had given it proof. "I'll do it," Novak said, "on one condition. We name it after them. The Walker-Chen-Johnson Tactical Innovation Unit. The Army won't approve naming a unit after enlisted casualties." "Then I don't do it," Walsh studied him. "You're serious." "They died because rules were wrong. If we're creating a unit that breaks rules to fix problems, it should be named after the men who paid the price for wrong rules." Walsh was quiet for a moment. Then he extended his hand. "I'll fight for it. Can't promise success, but I'll fight." They shook. Behind them, the sun set over white tanks and white snow. Somewhere in the distance, artillery rumbled, war continuing, always continuing. But here in this moment, innovation had won. Theft had become doctrine. Breaking rules had saved lives. Novak pulled out his notebook one last time, wrote a final entry. February 1st, 1945. Winter camouflage now standard across all armored units, European theater. Estimated 300 plus lives saved. Baker Company 0 casualties since implementation. Mission accomplished. He closed the notebook, looked at Morrison. "How many men we lose this month?" "None yet." "Keep it that way." "Planning on it, sir." The night came cold and clear. Stars appeared distant and indifferent. The war would continue for months through spring into summer until finally Germany surrendered. But here on this Belgian ridge, 15 white tanks had proven that sometimes the line between crime and courage was drawn in white paint, and sometimes breaking small rules saved big lives. Novak climbed into Invisible Justice one last time before his reassignment. The tank smelled of oil, gun smoke, and something else, success maybe, or vindication. He ran his hand across the controls, remembering the fear of stealing paint, the terror of proving it worked, the relief of 0 casualties. Tomorrow he'd leave for headquarters, start building a unit dedicated to innovation and rule-breaking. But tonight he was still Baker Company's commander, still the man who dared to steal paint when stealing saved lives. Outside, white tanks faded into darkness, invisible guardians of a ridge won through innovation, held through courage, and defended by men who understood that sometimes the rules were wrong, and fixing them required breaking them first. Frank Novak had started as a thief. He'd become a captain, But most importantly, he'd become proof that innovation saves lives. And sometimes saving lives means stealing paint and fighting the bureaucracy as hard as you fight the enemy. The white tanks remained. The doctrine changed. The army adapted. And Walker Chen Johnson, they didn't die for nothing, after all. 3 years after the war ended, Frank Novak stood in a field in Ohio watching his son play in snow that had nothing to do with death. The boy was 4 years old, building a snowman with mittened hands, laughing when the head kept falling off. Novak's wife, Sarah, appeared beside him with coffee. "You're thinking about Belgium again." "Always thinking about Belgium." He took the cup, watched steam rise in cold air. "This time of year especially, when the snow comes. The nightmares are back. Not nightmares, memories." He turned to her. "There's a difference." Sarah had heard the stories, some of them. The stealing, the painting, the zero casualties. What he didn't tell her was how it felt to watch a Sherman burn, knowing men were dying inside. How it felt to break rules and wonder if courage or selfishness drove the decision. How it felt to be called a hero for theft. The phone rang inside. Sarah went to answer it. Novak remained in the yard watching his son shape snow into something innocent and temporary. Sarah returned, expression unreadable. "That was the War Department. They want you in Washington next week. Something about a memorial." "What kind of memorial?" "They didn't say, just that your presence was requested." She handed him a letter that had arrived that morning. He'd been too distracted to open it. "This might explain." Novak tore open the envelope. Inside, official letterhead from the Department of Defense. "Captain Novak, your tactical innovations during winter 1945 are being recognized as decisive factors in reducing American armor casualties by an estimated 400 lives. A memorial is being established at Arlington National Cemetery, honoring innovations that changed warfare doctrine. Your attendance is requested for the dedication ceremony." 400 lives. He'd known the number intellectually, had calculated it from casualty statistics. But seeing it written, 400 men who went home because someone stole paint, made it real in a way that statistics couldn't. "Will you go?" Sarah asked. "I have to." He folded the letter. For Walker, for Chen, for all the ones who didn't make it home. Washington in February was cold, but not Belgium cold. Nothing would ever be Belgium cold again. Novak arrived at Arlington 3 days before the ceremony, wanting time to walk among the graves to remember properly. He found Walker's marker on the second day, a simple white cross among thousands. Private First Class Robert Walker, 3rd Armored Division, died January 8th, 1945. 22 years old, never got to open that garage in Detroit. Novak knelt in the snow, brushed frost from the stone. "We did it, Walker. Changed the whole damn army. 0 casualties after St. Vith. Your death meant something. I made sure it meant something." The stone didn't answer. Stones never did. He found Chen's grave nearby. Johnson had survived the war, but died in a car accident in 1947. His grave was in Michigan, too far to visit. But Chen was here, permanent and still. "Technical Manual 9850A, Novak said quietly. "Winter camouflage protocols for armored vehicles. They teach it at Fort Knox now. Every tank commander learns about visibility and first shot advantage, because you died before I figured it out." The wind picked up, scattering snow across the graves. Thousands of white crosses, each one a life ended. A family broken, a future unmade. How many of these deaths could have been prevented by someone willing to break rules earlier? The ceremony was on February 14th. Novak wore his dress uniform, the Bronze Star pinned to his chest. The captain's bars he'd earned through theft. A crowd gathered, officers, politicians, families of soldiers whose lives had been saved by innovations they never knew existed. General Harmon gave the speech. He was retired now, but his voice still carried command authority. "War rewards conformity. War demands obedience, but war also requires adaptation. The men and women we honor today understood that following orders isn't always the same as doing right. They saw problems that doctrine ignored. They found solutions that regulations forbade. And they had the courage to break rules when breaking rules saved lives." He gestured to the memorial being unveiled, a stone monument engraved with names and innovations. Novak saw his own name there alongside descriptions: Winter Camouflage Protocols 1945. Estimated 400+ lives saved through tactical adaptation of captured enemy materials. Captured enemy materials, Morrison's voice spoke from behind. That's a polite way to say theft. Novak turned, saw his old sergeant standing there, older, heavier, but the same sharp eyes. They embraced hard and quick the way soldiers do. You came, Novak said. Wouldn't miss it. Someone has to make sure you don't let this go to your head. Morrison looked at the memorial. 400 lives. That's a lot of people who owe their existence to you being willing to commit a crime. Not just me, all of us. But you let it. You made the decision. Morrison's voice softened. You know how many guys from Baker Company are still alive? All of them. Every single one. Henderson's teaching high school in Kansas. Martinez owns a restaurant in Texas. Davy's your gunner, he's a mechanic in California. Everyone who painted those tanks white went home. Novak felt something tight in his throat. Everyone. Everyone. Morrison pulled out a photograph, faded, creased from years, in a wallet. 15 white tanks in snow barely visible. On the back, written in pen, Baker Company, the Invisible Platoon, January 1945. We took this the day after Sankt Vith, Morrison said. When we knew we'd actually survived. When we knew you'd been right. He handed the photo to Novak. Keep it. Remember that breaking rules saved lives. Remember that questioning doctrine isn't treason, it's duty. The ceremony continued. More speeches, more names, more innovations born from necessity and desperation. But Novak barely heard them. He stared at the photograph, at those ghost tanks, at the proof that courage and theft sometimes looked identical. After the ceremony, families approached him. A woman in her 30s holding a baby. My father was in the 4th Armored Division. He adopted winter camouflage in January 1945. He always said it saved his life. Without your innovation, I wouldn't exist. Neither would my daughter. A middle-aged man walking with a cane. I was in the 6th Armored. We painted our tanks white based on your protocols. Took fire at Remagen, but they couldn't see us clearly. Missed their first 3 shots. We survived because we were invisible. One after another they came. Children of saved soldiers, grandchildren who existed because someone had stolen paint and proven that visibility mattered. 400 lives saved, but those lives had created more lives. How many people existed now because Novak had broken rules in Belgium? He couldn't count them. Didn't want to. The math was overwhelming. That evening, Morrison and Novak sat in a hotel bar drinking whiskey that was too expensive and tasted too smooth. Neither man spoke for a long time. You ever regret it? Morrison finally asked. The stealing, the risk. Every time I think about Walker dying before I figured it out. Novak swirled his glass. If I'd been faster, smarter, if I'd stolen that paint a week earlier, he might be alive, opening his garage, living his life. Or you might have been court-martialed before proving it worked and nobody would have adopted winter camouflage at all. Morrison set down his glass. You can't think like that. You did what you could when you could. That's all anyone can ask. Is it enough? Look at that memorial. Look at those families. 400 men went home because you dared to break rules. Morrison leaned forward. Most people spend their whole lives following orders, trusting the system, hoping someone else will fix problems. You fixed one. You saved lives. That's not just enough. That's everything. Novak pulled out the photograph again, studied it in the dim bar light. 15 white tanks barely visible, frozen in time. You know what bothers me most? It was so obvious. Paint the tanks white in winter. A child could figure it out. But it took 17 deaths before I had the guts to actually do it. That's not on you. That's on a system that made rule-breaking feel worse than letting people die. Morrison tapped the photo. But you broke the system. You proved that sometimes disobedience is duty. And now they teach it. Now every tank commander learns that questioning doctrine is part of the job. Because men died teaching us. Because you made their deaths mean something. They finished their drinks in silence. Outside, snow was falling on Washington's soft, peaceful nothing like Belgium. But Novak still saw that Ardennes snow, still saw those burning Shermans, still counted casualties in his sleep. The next morning before leaving Washington, Novak returned to Arlington. He walked among the graves until he found Walker's cross again. From his coat, he pulled out the photograph, the original, not a copy. The image Morrison had carried for 3 years, the proof that 15 tanks had disappeared into snow. He placed it at the base of Walker's grave, weighted down with a stone to keep the wind from taking it. "You wanted to build engines," Novak said quietly. "Instead, you proved we were building them wrong. Your death changed doctrine, Walker. The Army learned because you died. That's not fair. That's not right. But it's what happened." He stood, saluted the grave, and walked away. Behind him, the photograph remained 15 ghost tanks and 45 men frozen in the moment between theft and vindication. 10 years later, Novak received a letter from the Department of Defense. They were updating Technical Manual 9850A, incorporating lessons from Korea. Winter camouflage had been used extensively, saving lives in frozen mountains and snowy valleys. The letter asked if he had any recommendations for the revised doctrine. Novak wrote back, "Never let regulations prevent adaptation. Never let protocol override survival. And never forget that sometimes the most important military decision is being willing to steal paint when paint saves lives." The revised manual included his statement in the introduction. It also included a dedication in memory of PFC Robert Walker, PFC David Chen, and all soldiers whose deaths taught us that innovation matters more than conformity. By 1965, Novak was teaching at West Point. Military history, tactical innovation, the ethics of disobedience. His students called him the paint thief, and he wore the nickname with pride. In one lecture, he showed them the photograph, now famous, reproduced in textbooks studied in staff colleges. "These 15 tanks changed warfare doctrine," he told the cadets, "not because they had better guns or thicker armor, because their commander was willing to steal what they needed to survive." A cadet raised his hand. "Sir, would you recommend theft as standard military practice?" "I'd recommend courage as standard military practice. Sometimes courage means following orders. Sometimes it means breaking them." Novak paused. "The hard part is knowing which is which." Another cadet spoke up. "How do you know? You ask yourself, am I breaking this rule because it's convenient or because it will save lives? If the answer is convenience, follow the rule. If the answer is lives." He tapped the photograph. "Then you break the rule and deal with the consequences. Even if it means court-martial, especially if it means court-martial. Because men who are willing to sacrifice their careers to save their soldiers are the kind of leaders wars need." The lecture ended. Students filed out young and confident, not yet understanding that war would teach them things no classroom could. Novak remained looking at the photograph one more time. 15 white tanks, 0 casualties, 400 lives saved, thousands of descendants who existed because someone stole paint. That was the equation. That was the legacy. Frank Novak died in 1982 at age 63. His funeral was small family, a few Army friends, Morrison traveling from Arizona to say goodbye. They buried him at Arlington, not far from Walker and Chen. His son found a box in the attic after the funeral. Inside, the original oil-stained notebook pages filled with careful calculations and casualty statistics. Technical Manual 9850A, signed by Eisenhower. The Bronze Star citation framed. And a single photograph, 15 white tanks disappearing into snow. On the back of the photo, in Novak's handwriting, a final note. "We built this doctrine on theft and necessity. We proved it with 0 casualties. We spread it to save lives. Walker and Chen paid the price for our education." Never forget that innovation often begins with disobedience, and that sometimes breaking small rules prevents bigger tragedies. The color was wrong. We changed it. That's the whole story. Today, winter camouflage is standard military doctrine worldwide. Every army understands seasonal adaptation. Every tank commander learns about visibility and first shot advantage. The protocols are refined, modernized, backed by decades of research. But it started with one lieutenant who stole 40 gallons of paint because he was tired of watching his men burn. The memorial at Arlington still stands. Visitors walk past it reading names, learning about innovations born from desperation. Some stop at Frank Novak's entry, read about winter camouflage, and wonder what it must have felt like to break rules that were killing people. The answer is terrifying and necessary and right. Near Walker's grave, if you look carefully in winter, you can still see where someone placed a photograph 40 years ago. The image is long gone, claimed by weather and time, but the stone that held it remains a small anonymous marker that something important happened here. 15 tanks disappeared into snow. 0 casualties proved theft was worth it. 400 lives were saved by someone willing to break rules when rules were wrong. And in the end, that's not just a war story. It's a reminder that sometimes the most moral choice is the most illegal one, and that courage isn't always about following orders. Sometimes it's about knowing when orders need breaking and having the guts to break them. War is decided not just by weapons, but by minds willing to change. Frank Novak changed warfare because he dared to steal, to adapt, to prove that paint mattered more than protocol. The Army built its doctrine on conformity, but it survived on innovation. And sometimes innovation requires stealing 40 gallons of enemy paint and making 15 Shermans disappear. That's not the lesson they teach in textbooks, but it's the lesson written in snow, preserved in memory, and proven by men who came home because someone was willing to be a thief first and a hero second. If you believe their names should be remembered, share this story. Write Walker's name in the comments. Write Chen's. Write Novak's. Because memory is resistance. Remembering is how we honor those who died teaching us. And sharing is how we ensure their lessons don't disappear like tanks in snow, invisible, forgotten, lost to time. They changed warfare with stolen paint. We preserve that change by remembering why theft was necessary, why rules were wrong, and why sometimes the most important military innovation is having the courage to question everything. The invisible platoon saved 400 lives. Now their story saves something more important, the understanding that innovation matters, that adaptation saves lives, and that sometimes, just sometimes, breaking the rules is the most honorable thing a soldier can do.